Thanks. So, one of the things what we think about with natural gas, though, is the entire system that we're looking at. So we know natural gas or methane is 86 times as potent as CO2 if it's leaked into the atmosphere. And we need to understand how those methane leaks are occurring throughout the supply chain. So from the extraction points to where they are in our homes, there's leakage potential. And what we have found with recent studies and International Energy Agency data is that the global methane emissions reported by oil and gas companies have been about 95% lower than the actual emissions. So this is a real issue. And even if we had decided to reduce our natural gas use in some capacity by switching one part of our home over to an electrified appliance, for instance, but not switching all of it, we know that that natural gas system still in place is going to be problematic because of just the way the system operates and brings us and leaks. But it's also important to transition to clean heat for our health. The natural gas that many of us are using in our homes is really having the potential to make us sick. We know that it's driving up cancer rates, and it's driving up asthma rates. Cooking with a gas stove, for instance, creates NO2 and NOx pollution, and it releases PM2.5 pollution particles, particulate matter, both of which are lung irritants. Studies have actually found that childhood asthma cases, that 12.7% of childhood asthma cases are attributed to the use of gas stoves. And those gas stoves also emit benzene levels that are above that of even secondhand smoke. And this can be a carcinogen. But it's really important to recognize that these stove outputs are minor compared to the toxic pollution impacts on communities that live near oil and gas extraction and refining sites, which are most often predominantly in BIPOC communities. And the third reason to transition to clean heat is because it's more efficient, and that saves us. Natural gas requires extraction, refining, and that process is expensive and happens over and over, and we all pay the costs for that. So the next question that comes up in our title is, why clean heat by 2040? Meeting our climate goals requires early and equitable action. And I know you all care about this. You're here watching this. You're here engaged in all of these ways. And we often think about 2050 as a deadline of really big importance because the International Panel on Climate Change has stated that that is the date by which the planet must be at net zero emissions. If we think about what does it take to get the planet to net zero emissions, what that means is we can't be coming in at net zero at 2050. The New England Journal of Medicine a few years ago had a really important piece signed by 19 different medical journals. And this is what they said. Equity must be at the center of the global response, and wealthier countries will have to cut emissions more quickly, making reductions by 2030 and beyond, making those reductions by 2030 beyond those currently proposed and reaching net zero emissions before 2050. If we are working towards something, early action is the best action we can take. And there's a second reason why we should think about clean heat by 2040. And that is simply because we can. And that's what we're here to talk about today. We have this technology that we need for this transition. We even have more than ever before available funding streams. What we need is the vision for where we are going and the direction for how to get there. So the next part is to really think about, okay, you've said it, Sarah. Is it true? How do we get there? What is the technology that gets us to clean heat? And I know you've heard about these things before, but let's just to cover them here, we're talking about heat pumps. And it's really that heat pump action, moving heat around, that is central to all of these techniques. We've heard here about air source heat pumps, but it can also come from the ground source heat pumps. Networked geothermal is really another way of talking about ground source heat pumps, the heat you get from the ground. And then thermal energy networks are connected systems, and they might be geothermal systems using heat from the ground, but they could also be systems that are using heat from somewhere else, like water. Air source heat pumps are gaining steam all over the place. And I would love to ask Brett Pence, our Northern Minnesota director, who is an air source heat pump expert, to jump in here and tell us a little more about the work you've been doing and how air source heat pumps intersect with our transition to clean heat.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm happy to try and impart some of what I've learned. I hesitate to call myself an expert. I'm not a contractor. I prefer energy geek, perhaps, and someone who's been trying to learn about this technology and trying to help people apply it in their own homes and consider it in their own buildings in northern Minnesota. And that's one thing we've been doing over the past few years. If you look in the chat, I posted a few items. The one item is just on natural gas in the home and some of the dangers, and Sarah's talked about that a little bit, but that's some more information about that. There is also a link there to something called Heat Pump Helpers. This is a webinar that we conducted last year. It was focused on northern Minnesota, but it's broadly applicable across the state. And we were asking the question about air source heat pumps. Again, these are tools that move heat from one place to another. So moving heat from outside your home, and yes, it's amazing, but you can still find some heat outside your home at 10, 5, 0 degrees, and through the magic, what we should call science of differential fluids and pressures, we can move that heat that is incredibly outside the home into the house at that point. So what we wanted to do is look at these heat pumps and how they could be applied in northern Minnesota and how that technology may have changed. So you have a link to that webinar. We did 3 studies, three broad panels on that, looking at the technology itself and how it's changed, looking at the role of the contractor, and how that's really critical to people looking at this. And then we looked at broadly at the incentives there that are available. And some of the things we found is, there's a couple of things we all should know. One is, if you're going to decarbonize, you can't do it without decarbonizing buildings. So in the world, 40% of emissions are from buildings. So that's broadly electrical use, everything that uses a building, the materials in a building. It's just, you have to deal with it. And in Minnesota, if you're going to deal with limiting the emissions from a building, you've got to take on heating. So at least for our homes, for residential use, heating the air or conditioning the air in the summer, or heating water is over 50% of our energy load in a residential home in the United States. In Minnesota, that goes up to 70%. It's incredibly energy intensive to heat a home. In my home, it's 85%. I have a very efficient home, and most of the energy that I'm using is involved in space heating or water heating. So, and you find that across the board in northern Minnesota, where we have a higher heating load than other places. So it's incredibly important to us to look into this. What we found in the webinar is that these technologies are available. They have been available, but now they're available to work in cold climates, specifically down to as low as 15 below. So they can be broadly applied. They can work in older homes. And one thing we found, and I'll back up, one thing we did after our webinar is we applied for and received a grant from CERTS, which is a state clean energy agency, to help 5 homes in the Duluth Superior area to do an assessment of their home for heat pumps, and then to help them through the bidding process, contracting, assessment process. And that's ongoing. But what we found by taking the step beyond and actually looking at older homes in this area is that even older homes that you're retrofitting can often apply this heat pump technology, this cold climate heat pump technology. So it is broadly available. There are some barriers in terms of understanding the technology and how it can be used in older buildings, but it is an important piece. And it is something that is, I think, going to be just an incredible part of our landscape. The final note is that what we are finding in this is it really cuts emissions and energy use dramatically. We're talking 20, 30, 40% of a home's emissions by switching fossil fuel heating to cold climate heat pumps. So it isn't. It's more powerful than putting solar on your roof, for example. Maybe more powerful than switching to an EV in terms of its raw emissions. What we're reducing in terms of emissions and energy. So incredibly powerful. I think there are some barriers, perhaps, to the economics of that, and I think we're going to talk about policy at the end, and I'll kind of swing it back to Sarah. But yeah, we have this incredible opportunity in front of us, and we have to help each other realize it.
Thanks, Brett. You probably know people who have employed air source heat pumps. I see several of you on this call who I know have them in your homes. Joe and Joanne Ward opened up their home to our interns this summer, who were working on a project that Buff and the interns will show you a little bit later. But they've included so many features, and the reason I'm highlighting this here is that they have an air source heat pump with an electric backup. So sometimes we hear about, well, we need an air source heat pump with natural gas backup. But that isn't necessarily true. That isn't true. And they're an example of that. And then the good news is that we, for the first time here, have had heat pumps outsell gas furnaces in the United States. So they're on the move. That's great. So that's the air source heat pumps. We also have ground source heat pumps that transfers heat from the ground into the building. And we have a wonderful array of Minnesota ground source heat pump / geothermal case studies. Minnesota churches, St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church. This is in El Rosa, Minnesota. Population 213 is employing a geothermal system. And then you have across the state in Moorhead, in Edina, and Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Minneapolis. The manager of the church building at Mount Olive says, we hope that our bills will be at least half and probably 2/3 of what they were. There are also new geothermal systems. New technologies are being developed. Darcy Systems is one. They installed their system at the St. Paul Steam Fitters and Pipe Fitters, Local 455. They're experiencing the cooling costs have been cut by 85% for their building. because of installing the system, were able to remove 26 natural gas powered rooftop cooling units since the building's opening in 2015. And then we have networked thermal energy networks, which is this networked geothermal. It's happening across the state. We have examples with Duluth wastewater treatment facilities. It's happening in Rochester under construction now from all kinds of buildings with the Destination Medical Center and the City Hall, Public Library, Mayo Clinic Civic Center, and they have proposals to do more. Doing this research, though, this isn't necessarily brand new technology. It's taking off, but it's been around for a while. And one of the oldest systems that I know of was put in Milan, Minnesota, in Chippewa County, population 418. It's a networked system connecting their elementary school buildings, a church, and private residences. This was installed in 2006. And we're seeing that those benefits of these systems are being really taken advantage of by those institutions that are doing lots of building projects. Presbyterian Homes is one, for instance. So we've got a lot of projects going on that have been happening that we're learning from. There's really limitless potential here. And to talk about that a little more, I'd like to introduce Jim Doyle, who is representing St. Paul 350. Hello, all of the St. Paul 350 people on this call who've been working so hard to advance clean heat within St. Paul. Jim?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me to come and talk about what we're doing with St. Paul 350. We're a grassroots climate action and climate justice advocacy group based in St. Paul. And our current work is focusing on decarbonization of heating in the city of St. Paul. You know, as Sarah was saying, we want to reduce and eventually eliminate the reliance on natural gas or fossil gas, as it's now known more commonly. And our main effort in this regard is to engage with city leaders, including the city council members, the mayor office, and other city agencies, and to make sure that the city has a robust and timely plan to do this, to decarbonize heat. The Heights is a great example of how such engagement, in this case it was mainly with the St. Paul Port Authority, can have a real impact. So after the last couple of years, the prospect of a no gas development there kind of ebbed and flowed, but tenacious efforts, especially by St. Paul 350, led by Chelsea DeArmond, who leads the group, helped to bring about eventually a no gas commitment for the Heights. And in addition, there was strong support for network geothermal by potential business owners who realized the savings that could be had with this approach. In addition to the Heights, we're also engaging with the Hams brewery site. It has brewery, a distillery, and in the future from some housing, although as of now, we're still talking. There's no firm commitment yet, but we're hopeful that something will come of that. A main principal component of this St. Paul 350 engagement is to ensure that the next version of the St. Paul Climate and Resiliency Plan has a focus on a citywide and equitable decarbonization of heat. And as Sarah and Brett have been saying, that the way to do this, of course, is to electrify the heat using heat pumps. And of course, as our electricity grid continues to decarbonize, that's how we decarbonize heat. So the Climate and Resiliency Plan, affectionately known as CARP, is currently undergoing revision, and City Council will vote on it, the final version next spring. So part of our strategy here is to engage with City Council members on a ward-by-ward basis. And to that end, we have formed ward teams. They're now in the process of meeting with the council members. And we also meet regularly with Russ Stark, who is the Climate and Resilience Officer, who reports directly to the mayor. The next slide, Sarah. Yeah, so I guess that's just what I said. We need to stress the equitable desire that any decarbonization plan needs to be equitable. Low-income folks can reap the benefits of decarbonization. So we're recommending that any plan to pursue this decarbonization is a block-by-block approach instead of a random adoption of heat pumps by those who happen to be able to afford it. We're also promoting the geothermal and thermal energy networks as a way to take advantage of higher efficiencies that you get with geothermal, economies of scale, no need for backup heating, resistive heating, or gas heating, taking advantage of a wide variety of potential thermal sources and sinks, long lifetimes these systems have, hardware that's not exposed to the elements. So there's lots of advantage to this. And in addition, good jobs for good union jobs for pipe fitters. As Sarah mentioned, the local pipe fitters union is very enthusiastic about this. These trends in geothermal, this is something that can replace the traditional jobs of pipe fitters that are in that have a lot are mainly with refineries. So the pipe fitters see this as the future. And air source heat pump adoption that Brett was talking about, that will undoubtedly also play a role, I think, especially in the near term. And there are situations where these thermal networks may not be feasible, but we do believe that we should really take advantage of geothermal and thermal energy networks where we can right now, and eventually that will become the standard. That's the hope. Maybe there'll be some more discussion about the policy and costs. This is something we do have to pay some attention to. These systems typically have, at least right now, have a high capital cost, but there are some promising efforts to finance these kinds of efforts. And Rochester, Minnesota, for example, has had great success in tapping into millions of dollars of IRA funding for their downtown thermal energy network project. And here in St. Paul, we're very excited, St. Paul and Minneapolis, about Cooperative Energy Futures, a local solar installer who are now looking at weatherization and electrification of heat. They have a new sustainable homes program, which uses a kind of I guess it's a type of inclusive financing where, using IRA rebates and incentive, they can raise external capital to fund weatherization, electrification, and with investors paid back by the energy savings over time. So they're hoping to have 2,000 homes in the program by late 2026. And we are St. Paul 350. We're partnering with CEF in this effort with our ward teams and looking for scouting out possible sites for implementation. So that's basically where we're at. If anybody is living in St. Paul, member of any of the wards, we would love to have you on our ward teams that will be continuing to meet with the city council over the next few months as the climate and resiliency plan takes its final shape. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Jim. And if you don't live in St. Paul, you can take this model to wherever you do live. What I think is neat is that it's just been about engagement. And it wasn't that any particular person was put in charge of it. The committee of St. Paul 350 has been just reaching out and having those meetings, been on the lookout for the projects that would be a fit, And it's all about starting conversations. So no matter where you are, if you're in Woodbury or you're in Litchfield, you can be engaging with your community leaders and city government and talking about where these kinds of projects will fit. And I also want to just speak to the idea of, well, like, is there a choice that one should be making? So for instance, I live in St. Paul and I'm excited about network geothermal, but I'm also thinking about an air source heat pump. Is it a bad idea for me to move forward with one if another might be coming? And we're going to share in the follow-up some research, but it really shows that you get extra efficiency and extra cost savings benefits when you're combining these technologies. So that isn't a concern I need to have. I think I'll be moving forward with the air source heat pump, but also be looking for how my community can make inroads into networked thermal energy networks. So I'm going to then shift from here we are. We've had a discussion of how all of these technologies are being used and being spread out. What are the barriers that we are seeing to moving forward with clean heat? And I'd offer that there are a couple, and they fall into a couple of categories. One is being delayed by the pursuit of false solutions. And the other is active predatory delay by the utilities and the fossil fuel industry. I'm just going to break this down a little bit. We've just shown all of the ways that clean heat can benefit our health, our climate, our pocketbooks. But what these new systems do not benefit is the status quo of natural gas industry. They are working overtime to drive a narrative that sounds something like this. We don't know how to do this. Wow, it's exciting, but how will we do it? Let's pilot new technologies. Let's innovate. In fact, they were part of passing legislation called the Natural Gas Innovation Act, which dictated spending certain amounts of money on things that we know can't be part of our decarbonized future, but encourage or mandate those natural gas companies to spend money on systems that double down on expensive infrastructure that they will profit from. Utilities profit from building things. And so if they build more infrastructure, that is a recipe for them to receive profits. One of these solutions that I will put in quotes, one of these false solutions is something called renewable natural gas. Renewable natural gas is the idea that you take the methane that comes from two places, typically either landfills or manure lagoons associated with concentrated animal feedlot operations. And you capture that methane and you build an infrastructure that funnels it into the natural gas system. This is really a technology or a system that would benefit really only the large-scale dairy producers. It's not something that a smaller family farm can incorporate. And so ultimately, it's incentivizing consolidation, further consolidation of dairies. It promotes these concentrated animal feedlot operations and the manure pits and lagoons that go with it. And these really have impacts on communities, rural communities, from air quality to water quality. This is not the kind of solution that helps on all fronts. But what it does is it spends money that could be going to other real solutions into a system that just extends the infrastructure for a natural gas system. So for instance, Riverview Dairy is a system that is investing in renewable natural gas. It's the third largest dairy operation in the world in Western Minnesota, but it operates not only in Western Minnesota, but South Dakota, Nebraska, New Mexico, and Arizona. Their operation actually takes the calves that are born in 10,000 head dairy barns and moves them by truck to New Mexico and Arizona, where they mature there. And then they move the mature dairy cows, they truck them back to barns in Minnesota. Mature beef goes to CAFOs in Nebraska and South Dakota. This operation moves all over. So this is just to show that this is not your family farm dairy operation. But when you have a large system like this, and they are able to profit off of something like renewable natural gas, if we create markets for that and expand those markets, whether it's in this state or other states, that creates incentives for systems that are not helpful for our climate or our communities or our health. Renewable natural gas is one false solution, but also hydrogen is something that we need to be aware of too. Often hydrogen is talked about as something that we need to help us get to that last bit of decarbonation for difficult to decarbonize industries. But no one is really thinking that hydrogen is a good option for heating our homes. So we really need to be selective about the various places where hydrogen might be a real solution and where it's not really a tenable solution for a number of different reasons. And I mention these two because these are elements of Natural Gas Innovation Act proposals by Centerpoint particularly, where their proposal to the PUC said, this is our plan for investing in these items. We're going to do some networked geothermal pilot projects. That's great. We support that. We're also going to do some renewable natural gas, and we're going to be doing some experimentation with hydrogen. And those are the kinds of investments that really detract from what we know will work to decarbonizing heat in Minnesota. This is what I think I heard this term not too long ago, and I thought it resonated, and it's important for us to understand. It's this predatory delay is the idea that they're actively working to stall the things we know we need to do because they're not directly benefiting their particular industry at the time. So these are the false solutions that we need to be alert to and worried about. And part of that predatory delay is simply that despite having the technology to not build with natural gas, we continue to see natural gas build out happening. Happening everywhere in all kinds of building developments. And we know too that there are incentives put in place by utilities, for instance, CenterPoint, that reward builders who are installing natural gas. Incentives for vacations that they can win and trips and other things. So this is a system that is meant to make sure we're building more natural gas instead of less. So how can we overcome these barriers? And this is where we're going to talk about policy a little bit, and then we're going to talk about other actions we can take. There are policy opportunities for us, and the discussions have been started by many advocacy organizations about how we can move to clean heat. You are all well aware that we passed a 100% clean electricity bill in 2023. We need to do something similar for natural gas and for clean heat. And so that could be, that benchmarking bill is something that we hope there will be increased conversation for. And we need to show our legislators that we are demanding that. The electricity sector has a bill, and now we need these other sectors. And home heat, decarbonizing home heat is the next sector. There are other kinds of legislation too that other states have been adopting that are being considered in Minnesota as well. For instance, a utility accountability bill. And what is this? Well, this is really saying, what is it that ratepayers shouldn't have to pay for? As when you are assessed your bill for natural gas, what are you paying for that maybe you shouldn't have to? Is it the excessive executive compensation that we see that utility executives are receiving in the millions of dollars? And by in the millions, I think CenterPoint's executives were receiving compensation in the $20 and $30 million range. Are they the dues to the Natural Gas Association that they pay? And the Natural Gas Association is actively working to promote natural gas. Is it the build out of new natural gas infrastructure? Is it lobbyists at the state capitol? I believe Xcel Energy has 80 lobbyists. Is it the marketing materials they use to promote natural gas? These kinds of things can be part of a package where we say, you know, if you're doing these things, do it at your shareholders' expense, not at the ratepayers' expense. That's a first step to thinking about how we can limit the power that those utilities have to stall the progress we need to make. And I'd just like to point out that there are a lot of communities around the country, even in cold places, that are doing bans on build out of new natural gas. New York State passed the first law in the country banning natural gas and other fossil fuels in most new buildings. Denver, Chicago City Council is considering it. Massachusetts has 10 cities and towns that are banning natural gas in all their major renovations. Washington, D.C. So this is happening around the country, and it's a conversation we need to be having here. There's a study that I'd like to highlight that was just released this summer. The Clean Heat Coalition of Minnesota, which is a number of advocacy organizations that you are familiar with who are participating in this coalition. The Citizens Utility Board, CUB, and Fresh Energy commissioned a study to say, hey, how can we get to clean heat in Minnesota by 2050? Let's compare a couple different paths. We'll compare a path that's full electrification to a path that also includes renewable natural gas. And the important takeaway here is that the results were that full electrification is better on every front. From cost effectiveness, the costs were simply lower to pursue this path, to health benefits, to emission reductions goals. On all of those fronts, the full electrification path was better. And what's really exciting too is that the study it looked at ground source heat pump, the networked geothermal a bit, but it did not really have a large place for that in the transition. So what we know is that even with a limited amount, we were able to chart a path to 100% decarbonization of heat. But we can do it probably faster and better using all of the tools we've talked about here today. So what are the actions that we can take? We're going to be following up in the next couple of days with a big resource sheet. On our website, we'll have a number of resources about the things we've talked about here and different actions that you can take. But here's what I'd really love is for you to make an appointment with your legislator. Find some friends, some neighbors, other colleagues, have a small group, have a larger group, but make an appointment to say, here's what we'd like to talk about, how we're getting to clean heat in Minnesota, that we need to do this, but we know that utilities are stalling and we must avoid false solutions. So we're happy to help you with arranging those meetings in any way that you would like, but we'd love to encourage you to be engaging in that kind of way. The second thing is we are collecting through a Google form here and any other way you want to reach us. Who would like to join our Clean Heat Policy Discussion and Action Group? We'll be following up with that too. But there are actions we can take that are on the ground and at the Capitol. But there's a lot we can do here. So, and with this, I just want to toss it over to Buff Grace and his fabulous team of interns who have been working with MNIPL this summer to talk about their really cool project. Buff,
Thanks, Sarah. Yep, sorry with my mic there. Sarah's been talking a lot about the barriers and the landscape of policy at the large level to get into clean heat. We're also working at the local level, at the household level, trying to help folks in our faith communities, spiritual communities do this. And we're fortunate each summer to have a team of scholars from the University of North Carolina come and help us answer a question. We asked them this summer to answer a question of like, how do we help households make quicker transitions to better alternatives in their homes for climate? And so I'll turn it over to them to show you one of the pieces of what they produced.
Hello, everybody. We are the MNIPL interns. There's 4 of us, but it's kind of hard to see. We are, as Buff was mentioning, scholars from UNC, and we came up here to be interns for MNIPL. We spent about 8 weeks in Minneapolis tackling the process of electrification. And we started by just conducting general interviews with constituents and people who had already started making these changes towards electrification or were interested in it. And in conducting these interviews, we noticed one of the key barriers that were repeatedly coming up was this auditing process, which is typically the first step in making these changes towards electrification. And we noticed that a lot of homeowners, it seemed like a big commitment for people. It also does cost money. And while there are, what are the words? I forgot. Really cheaper options. There's cheaper options, but it's still expensive. And then one of the other things that you have to consider is some homeowners might not be able to take 2 hours off of work to get this conducted. So it's, while a necessary first step, often a big one. So we built a digital auditing tool, which allows you to do some of the basic parts of an audit on your own in 10 minutes or so. And this helps ease that gap of the barrier between the first necessary step to start taking electrification or start taking steps towards electrification. Once you go through the quiz, it gives a personalized recommendation for what your next step should be towards the electrification or towards the electrification of your home in 5 different categories. Does anyone else want to speak on that?
Sure, yeah. So we basically split the audit process as we have it here, and this is still the first iteration of the product. So with time, we hope that it will be built out to be so much more. But for this, we focused on appliances, so that being washer, dryers, and stoves. We did water heating, like just air heating, insulation. And these key areas are basically the user will fill out a set of questions like, do you notice that your home has drafty areas? Do you notice that your water heater is warm to the touch? And based on this, the program is able to then provide a very personalized set of recommendations as to, okay, based on the symptoms that you've indicated you see in your home, then these are likely the issues that you're experiencing, and here's what we recommend you do. And this is all free. It doesn't completely take the place of an audit, but it really is a great first step to doing around like 70% of what an audit can do. And it also is just something that allows users to buy into this whole electrification process very easily and without putting an upfront cost.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Yeah, we are excited. The scholars are finishing their internship this week. They've given us this tool. We're in the process of porting it over to our website, and we'll have a few small tweaks to it, and we hope to have this ready to go by later in August. So, way to go, interns.
Totally. So exciting. Thank you so much. I'll just finish by saying that there are a couple of other ways that we could use your comments and work right now. And those are PUC dockets. The first one is on gas integrated resource planning. If you are interested in making a comment, that would help really highlight the values we have and how the PUC should assess these plans, please reach out to me. The deadline is next Friday. We're working on our MNIPL comments. We would love to have you submit other comments too, and we'll be happy to help you with that. So my email is there, and I'll put it in the chat as well. The other docket is on whether we should pay dues for Xcel to be in the natural gas, American Gas membership. And again, that's a comment period deadline of next week. So reach out to us if you'd like help making a comment to that. But basically, this is your chance to say, should we be paying for those kinds of dues through the rates that we pay for our utility rates? You're a wonderful group. Thank you so much. I'd love to have a conversation with all of you individually. And I'm so sorry that there isn't time for questions, but reach out to me if you'd like to. We'll put that Google form for if you're interested in being in the policy and action teams for Clean Heat into the chat so that we can either connect you with those who are doing it, or we can do policy work as we're engaging together. And I'd really love to ask for your support for this work that we're doing at MNIPL. Here is a code on your screen. If you're able to give a gift today, that would be terrific. This is important work. We're a scrappy organization. We're grateful for all the help we can get. So thank you very much. We hope you are going to have a really great rest of your Thursday, and please reach out with any questions you have. My email just went into the chat. Thanks so much for all of your work, and thank you to our presenters today. Bye-bye.